This is Now What? Life After Redundancy, when your job disappears, but you don't. Hello, I'm Stevie, and you're joining me on my journey through and hopefully past redundancy, where I'm regularly asking myself the question, now what? And this podcast is all about navigating redundancy, identity wobbles, job search fatigue, and that strange chapter of life where your diary is suddenly less full, but your brain is somehow busier than ever. Which is quite an achievement, really. Very few things in adult life manage to create both too much time and not enough peace at the same time, but redundancy does have a go. This is a show for people who are asking themselves, now what? Now what do I do with my time, my confidence, my experience, my energy, and the parts of my brain that keeps trying to build a 5-year recovery strategy while I'm just standing in the kitchen eating shreddies. And today we're talking about passion projects, side hustles, and trying something new. Because the moment your normal working life gets knocked sideways, something interesting kind of happens. Part of you starts to think, maybe this is the moment. Maybe this is my chance to finally do the thing I've always talked about. Start the channel, write the book, build the app, make the thing. Try the idea, become one of those annoyingly fulfilled people who says, honestly, I just wanted to create something on my own, and somehow means it. But the other part of you is still an adult, so naturally your first instinct is to downplay the whole thing, make a joke, and quietly assume it's probably a bit indulgent. You can be in the middle of a genuine life reset and still feel faintly embarrassed about having an idea. So that's what we're getting into today. I want to talk about the appeal of side hustles, the fantasy version of them, the traps to watch out for, and what I think actually helps when you're trying to build something from nothing while also still dealing with the very real business of needing work, needing money, and occasionally needing to sit in a room and answer questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Without saying ideally less tired. We'll also have Liam Walker on the show today, who was made redundant recently and used this period to start a cycling YouTube channel that's picked up real traction and opened up some interesting opportunities while he's also navigating the reality of searching for what comes next professionally. I think it's really important because it's not one of those suspiciously tidy stories where someone gets made redundant on a Tuesday, follows their passion on a Wednesday, and by Friday they're posting a thread about what leaving corporate taught me about abundance. And that did sound a lot like a Craig David song. Anyway, it's more useful than that, more real. And by the end of this episode, I'm hoping you will come away with a more grounded way of thinking about passion projects. Not as magic escape hatches, not as proof you should immediately start referring to yourself as a founder because you once bought a domain name at 11:30 at night, but as something that can restore momentum, confidence, curiosity, and a sense that you're still moving something forward, even when the rest of life feels a bit stuck. If that sounds useful, make sure you follow the show wherever you're listening, leave a rating or review if you haven't already, and share it with someone else who is currently wondering whether their long-delayed idea is worth a go, or if it should remain where it currently lives, which is in a note on a phone somewhere between buy bin bags and check why my loft hatch is making noises. Right, let's get into it. So, I think there's a very particular type of energy that can appear during redundancy. It's part fear, part restlessness, part hope, and part what I can only describe as mildly chaotic reinvention. It's the energy that leads you to think things like, maybe now is the time to write a children's book. Maybe now is the time to design greeting cards. It's the time to narrate audiobooks, build an app, create a board game, start a podcast, launch a consultancy, start a YouTube channel, and finally become the kind of person who says portfolio career without needing to sit down afterwards. And to be completely fair, some of that energy is really useful. Because redundancy forces a question that normal working life is really good at helping you avoid. And it's basically, what do I actually want to make, build, try, or explore if I'm not just running around on routine and mild panic? And that question can have real value. But it can also come with a bit of danger, because the moment you're vulnerable, uncertain, or trying to rebuild your confidence, it becomes very easy to put far too much weight on one idea. You're not just writing a kid's book, you're writing the thing that might save this entire period from feeling like a write-off. You're not designing a board game, you're potentially creating a new version of your life. You're not just starting a podcast, you're apparently rebuilding your identity from the ground up with a microphone, some editing software, and whatever scraps of self-belief weren't already eaten by job applications. And this is kind of where side hustle culture can become deeply unhelpful. Because the whole side hustle culture rarely says, here's a nice, meaningful thing you can do that may help restore your energy and remind you that you still have some control in your life. No, side hustle culture turns up like a bloke on LinkedIn with extremely white teeth and far too much certainty, telling you that if you're not monetizing your expertise while you sleep, then frankly, you're leaving value on the table. Everything is being framed like missed commercial opportunity. How quickly can it grow? How much can it make? Can you scale it? Can it replace your income? Can it become passive? Which is really irritating because most things worth doing at the start are not very passive. They're fiddly, messy, repetitive, they've got a load of admin involved, and they also somehow involve trying to understand thumbnails, metadata, formatting, testing, timing, audience behavior, and why one tiny task has somehow taken your entire afternoon. Much like any adult job, really, or trying to put a fitted sheet away in the airing cupboard without becoming strangely furious. And I've definitely felt that pull myself, because I have tried a lot of things. And to be fair, I was doing this before redundancy impacted me. I've always been really interested in the prospect of creating something or designing something. So I've previously written a children's book. It's on Amazon right now. It's not high on the list of things, but it's there. I wanted to design a board game. I realized that there was going to be too much work involved, but I got into board game playtesting. And this podcast has moved forward because I keep recording, editing, I keep improving my process of making these episodes. And none of this has been done in some glamorous hustle culture kind of way. It definitely didn't involve a montage with dramatic music and a whiteboard full of arrows. It was just small increments, repeated a bit more and then a bit more. And that makes it much less exciting. It has much less energy of the triumphant film trailer and much more of the energy of someone quietly sorting things out in the spare room while also needing to pop downstairs because a delivery has photographed the pavement and claimed that you weren't in. But that's kind of how things actually grow. It's not through one burst of brilliance, but through repeated contact. And the reason I think it matters is because when people talk about their passion projects after redundancy, they often make them sound like a glorious rediscovery of self, which, in fairness, sometimes they are. But they can also just be you, sat at the laptop wondering why the file won't export properly while eating a biscuit that was meant to go with a cup of tea you forgot to make. It's not always cinematic. Sometimes it can be a little more ZX Spectrum than Silicon Valley. A bit clunky, a bit improvised, a bit, let's see if this loads, and if not, I may have to rewind the tape and start again. But it doesn't mean it isn't real. In fact, that's often how real things begin. And that's the tension at the heart of it for me. Passion projects can be absolutely energizing. They can restore confidence and create momentum. They can remind you that you're still capable of making things happen, but they can also become another place to feel inadequate if you load them too quickly with impossible expectations. And this is why I wanted to invite Liam into this episode, because his story sits in that fantastic middle. It isn't a neat little, I followed my dream and now everything is sorted story. It's much more grounded. He leaned into something he genuinely cared about, gave it proper attention, saw real traction, and did all of that while still being in the uncertainty of redundancy and job searching, which for most people listening is probably the version that feels recognizable. So today we're hearing from Liam Walker, and Liam has spent the past 10 years working in financial services, and his role was made redundant at the end of 2025. During redundancy, he decided to lean into one of his passions properly and started a YouTube channel documenting his cycling, his rides, the training, and the whole process, which has gained a fantastic bit of traction and opened up some real interesting opportunities along the way. You can find links to his YouTube channel and Instagram in the show description, but for now, let's roll VT. So Liam, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here. Just to jump right in and get us started, could you tell us a bit about who you are, what your working background is, and what redundancy has looked like for you so far?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. Thank you very much for having me. So by trade, I am a product owner. So I've worked for Barclays Bank for the past 10 years, and a lot of that has been in product. So I worked in the online banking and the mobile banking world, had a specific area, worked to solve problems, and then hopefully make things a little bit better for our customers. I was made redundant a few months ago now, so I've been navigating that. And I think one of the things which has really helped me has been diving into my hobbies. So I'm a massive hobbyist, always have been throughout my life. Gaming, record collecting, hiking, all sorts of stuff. Most recently, though, that obsession has been cycling. And that's one of the things which has really got me through the past couple of months. And I've kind of diversified that passion by turning it into YouTube.
Before we get into the details of the YouTube channels, how did that period feel like at the start? Kind of what's the emotional journey been like for you?
It's been a complete roller coaster. I was initially probably a little bit overconfident about redundancy. It was like this, it was going to be this big holiday where everything would be hunky-dory. I'd worked at Barclays for a while, so I knew I was going to get some severance. I knew I was going to get some garden leave, and I was looking forward to that. I'd worked hard over the past couple of years. However, over time, that has really, really changed. You know, it's brought on a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, a lot of self-doubt. And there's been a lot of self-management and learning along this time, not only about what I want to do in life, but also about myself, some of my strengths and some of my weaknesses, and some of the stuff that I really need to change. I think over the redundancy as well, I've let some things grow which are probably suppressed for a little while. So I'm very naturally a creative person. Like in high school, I did all of the arts, design, and put my corporate hat on over the past few years, and gradually that's just been squished and squished and squished. So I've let that flourish a little bit, and it's something which I've really enjoyed. So that's been the light amongst this quite difficult time.
That's fantastic. So I guess when you found yourself in this position, what made you decide to put your time and energy into your cycling YouTube channel?
It was one of those things that I've wanted to do for so long. I wish you had like a stats board as a human where you could see the amount of hours that you've spent watching YouTube, because for me, it would be ridiculous. I've always wanted to do it. I tried in the past to make like a hiking video. I actually did make a couple of hiking videos, but I was just that shy of what people might think that I never published it. But I've got a little bit older now, and that's something I don't really care about what people think. And one of the first projects I'd set myself to do when I was made redundant was to convert my garage into a gym. During the process, I've done loads of research and I watched many YouTube videos, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to give back. I'm going to make a YouTube video of me converting my gym, really into cycling. So I've got like a little cycling setup in there and some strength stuff. And I thought, yeah, this is going to be great. I can do this. And then I'll put it on YouTube, and I'm not really bothered what happens. But right at the end of that video, I said something, and I didn't plan on saying it at the time, but I basically said, and I'm going to start documenting my cycling journey. So if you want to follow along, please subscribe. And I just said that, and it was just like oh, I'm doing this. I'm committed. And I never expected anyone to watch that video, but quite a lot of people did, and quite a lot of people commented, and I really enjoyed the community side of things. And all of a sudden, I've made a video on cycling every single week since then, and it's been going on for 2 or 3 months now. So yeah, it's become my life.
So do you think the redundancy gave you permission to take this seriously,
Yeah.
or is it a different kind of slant?
Absolutely. I needed that time where, I probably could have done it anyway, But this was almost like, right, you have this time off. It's your time. You've worked hard for this. You're now in this position. Make the most of this opportunity. And I jumped at it. It's probably the thing I'm most grateful for of being made redundant, if that's a thing that you say, because it forced me into a mindset where I was like, well, no, what do I want to do with this? It's a very stressful time, but you can treat it as a gift too. And I think that would probably be my biggest advice to anyone going through this is like, if there's something that you really want to do or something that you've been put off, prioritize that at least for a couple of weeks before you start the job hunt. It's probably the thing I'm most grateful for. I think the amount of time to think, why didn't I do that sooner?
So before you started getting into the regular rhythm of producing your YouTube content, did it start off feeling exciting? Was it risky? Were you worried about reception, or was it a bit of everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was anything that I want to do. I like a certain level of polish, but I had no skills. I picked up a phone camera before to take a picture of, the dog, lots of pictures of the dog. But beyond that, no, I'd never really done anything serious. And all of the content I was consuming on YouTube when I was looking into making a garage gym and all of the cycling stuff that I watch, it's all very, very polished. It's people who've been doing it for years, really honing in on the craft. And I wanted it to be like that. But at the same time, my day job as a product manager, it's all about iteration. You start with something really small, an MVP, and you put it out there and you see if people like it, and then you build on that. You take the feedback, and I was like, use that skill set that you've got here, make something, doesn't matter if it's brilliant, and then learn from it. And I probably watch my videos more than anyone else has. Every single episode that I make, I'm sat there almost with a notepad. I could improve that. That was really good. I'm going to do that again. Fell down the rabbit hole of how do I make my audio better? How do I make my video better? And I think that's the part which I've really enjoyed most so than anything, because as I'm looking for a job and I'm increasing my vocational skills, but I've also got this thing which is a passion project which I can learn and I can put some energy into it too. And I can also build my schedule around that as well.
So what has building the channel given you during a period that could otherwise feel quite unsettled?
It's given me rhythm. It's given me consistency. It's given me a purpose. It's given me goals. And I think that is so important if you find yourself in this situation. When you work, you're given a schedule. There's meetings put in your diary. You've got a task set by the organization. Obviously, if you have been made redundant, your ultimate goal for most people is going to be to find the next thing. That might be a job, or it might be starting your own business. It might be thinking about retirement. But I think you've got to give yourself something outside of that. And that's what this YouTube channel has ultimately created for me. I have a content schedule. I'm thinking about where I want to be in the next 5 months. I'm thinking about partnerships. I'm thinking about what videos I want to make and all of the things that I need to improve. And that has just helped me stay switched on. It's helped me stay sharp. And even when things have been difficult on the job front, I've had this one thing which I can control and has kept me strong.
That's great. And do you think that working on the channel content has altered the way that you think about work or success and what you want next?
Yeah, it's that has been a brilliant thing, and it's also been a very difficult pill to swallow, because I enjoyed many parts of what I did when I was working as a product owner in a bank. It really tapped into a lot of the things which matter to me, solving problems and what have you. But although there's times when I'll put many hours into making these videos, it never once feels like work. And so it's completely broken me as a person now, because it's like, could that become your job? You would enjoy doing that. You'd be passionate about doing that, and you'd put all of your energy into that. But at the same time, I built this YouTube channel around a hobby, something which I can do to de-stress. So it's really conflicting. If I was to become a full-time YouTuber making cycling content, sounds fantastic, but what about when that work becomes stressful or too much? So it's brilliant, but it's also quite conflicting.
It's really, really interesting. I know that I've experienced this previously, but there is a fantasy that a passion project can suddenly become the answer to everything. But I'm very aware that real life is usually a bit messier than that.
Yeah.
How have you balanced growing the channel while keeping the job search? Like, what practical things have you done to keep the two working?
Yeah, I had to give myself a reality check at one point. I'll hold my hands up and say there was probably a period of about a month or so where that was the ultimate priority.
Mm.
I've got a mortgage, I've got bills which need to pay, and there's only so long you can stop looking at that pot of money in your bank. You can't just keep pushing that aside. At some point you're going to have to find work again. So I had to at one point sit down and actually plan out, right, what is my diary going to look like a little bit better? Where am I putting my energy? And a lot of it was going into this content creation stuff. And I had to just shift the balance a little bit. And I had to put, let's say, maybe 70% into this job hunt and skills, and more kind of 30% on that. And that might shift on certain days of the week every now and again. If, let's say, I've got a particular big idea that I want to work on, but ultimately I need to be prioritizing putting food on the table.
And I guess a question that I'm often asking myself is if tomorrow a job you'd applied for phoned up and said, you know what, Liam, you are the person we want, come and start working for us tomorrow, we've got a lot for you to do. Have you thought about how you're going to maintain the YouTube content, or have you not crossed that bridge yet?
It's something which is on my mind. In some ways it would be difficult to do. And I think I'd have to have a really honest conversation with myself about, where I want to put that energy, because working a full-time job, family, friends, those types of commitments, and then making YouTube videos, but also as well making YouTube videos around an endurance sport. If you don't cycle, it's very typical for me to be putting 10 hours of just on the bike. Now you put editing content around that, and then, put in 40 hours a week into a job, you start to realize that that's going to be a challenge. So I haven't solved that problem yet, but it's one that I'm conscious of, and I'm going to need to really think about. I think I'm going to have to balance my diary. I'll probably have to reduce the amount of time that I'm shipping out content. Maybe one day it could be a case that, I'm working some type of job share or more kind of part-time and split it. That'd be nice, but we're not quite there yet at the moment.
Yeah. I guess you can delay the decision as to whether you are a fully rounded grown-up or cycling hermit. So I guess it's figuring out where that balance sits. That's grand.
Yeah.
And across the journey that you've been on so far, what do you think you've learned about yourself through doing this that you wouldn't have learned if redundancy hadn't forced you into this bit of a reset?
Yeah, I'd completely forgotten about this whole side of myself, which is very, very creative and fun-loving. I think I channeled that a lot into elements of my job. For example, I've mentioned problem solving a few times. Problem solving is very creative and you can apply that, but just the pure creativity where, I'm thinking about kind of music and visual aesthetics. I didn't really touch on that too much in work. And I'm loving that side of things now. It taps into a lot of my kind of hobbies and interests from the past. And it's almost bringing out that inner child in me in some respects. And it's one thing I'm going to take forward, even if when I start working, that I have to cut down on this side of thing. But how can I nourish that inner child, that creative, that fun-loving side a little bit more, even when I'm doing the day job and the stress is a little bit higher?
So I think one of my core questions for you is for someone listening who's navigating redundancy right now and has a thing that they've always wanted to try, but keeps telling themselves that it isn't practical or it's not the right time. What would your guidance or suggestion be for them?
It will never be the right time. And now more than ever, if you have time on your plate, it couldn't be more perfect. It should be something that you absolutely prioritize, because you may never get that opportunity again. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And I think this is a prime example of this now. No matter what happens during these next couple of months, no matter how difficult it gets in terms of finding a job, I will always be really, really grateful for myself that I took this opportunity to do the thing that I've wanted to do for so long. It's been the best decision. I've connected with people that I never otherwise would have connected. I built something that I'm really proud of, something that I look forward to and think about all the time. And yeah, it's been one of the best things which has happened to me in the past couple of years. And it's just because I took that first step. You don't see, and even listening to this podcast now, you won't hear all the parts that Steve's edited out, and it's the exact same on those YouTube videos. I'm going to share it one day, but there's a clip that I filmed when I very first made my first YouTube video, and I'm just looking, and you can just see this little boy who's so scared of just trying to say his first line on his first YouTube video, but in reality, it's a 33-year-old man that stood in his garden outside his garage. And I'm really proud of that person, because if you look at me now compared to that, all the passion and the energy is coming out, and it's just because I took that first step.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Liam. It's been great speaking to you. I guess kind of the one final question that I'm intending to ask everyone I get to speak to on this podcast is, because it's a universal experience, we've all navigated interviews. I am interested to know what your least favorite interview question is.
My least favorite interview question is, tell me about yourself.
Really?
Yeah, that elevator pitch. How far, how deep do you go? Because I'll talk to you all day if you want. I'm a man of many interests. Do you just want to know about work, Liam, or do you want to know about Liam and all these little side quests that he loves to do? Do you want to know the name of my dog and the type of walks that we like to go on? So, yeah.
I mean, surely
Take
it's the
out the work
opportunity
content.
to find out if you're being interviewed by a cycling enthusiast and then kind of create that connection right there.
That's it. Or like the interview that I sat on the other day, it was, tell us about yourself. I told them about myself and they went, okay, so the first question is...
Ouch.
Yes, ouch.
That's going to sting. Oh, brilliant. Oh, well, Liam, thank you so much. We'll get the link in the podcast notes and hopefully we'll get to hear from you again. You can come back and tell us about your progress and how things go.
Thank you very much for having me, Steve.
So what I like about Liam's story is that it isn't selling you a fantasy. It's showing us something much more useful than that. It's showing that trying something new during redundancy can absolutely be worthwhile before it becomes commercially useful, even if it never becomes your full-time thing. And I think that matters because one of the easiest ways to kill a great idea is to demand too much from it too early. So if you're in that position right now, if you've got a thing that you want to try, make or build, I think I've got 3 principles that could be genuinely helpful. The first is this: choose something that you can stay interested in long enough to get through the awkward phase. Because everything has an awkward phase. This podcast had an awkward phase. Every single project starts off just a little bit wonky, a bit uncertain, kind of underdeveloped. There's always a stretch where it doesn't yet justify the excitement you had about it, and where other people looking in may be politely supportive in that very British way that translates as, I love that for you, though I personally would not be mentioning it again until it's a bit clearer what it is. And that's the stage where most passion projects just kind of die. It's not because the idea is bad, but because it's stopped being exciting and started asking something much ruder of you, which is consistency. So don't just ask, do I like the sound of this? Ask, do I care enough about this to keep going once it becomes repetitive, mildly fiddly or inconvenient, and not immediately rewarding? Excitement is lovely. It gets you started, but interest is better. Interest keeps you coming back. The second principle is this: make the project small enough that it can survive contact with your actual life. And this, I think, is where I've gone wrong previously when I've dabbled in other random side hustles. You have one decent idea and suddenly your brain has written a trailer for your whole life. By next month, you've launched the thing, built the audience, found the revenue stream, sorted the branding, and become the kind of person who has opinions on mailing list conversion. And then, because you are still also a normal person with job applications, family responsibilities, low energy days, and a weird amount of time spent finding charges that were definitely here a minute ago, none of that happens. So it starts to feel like failure. But I think often it isn't failure, it's just bad sizing. And what works better is just small progress. So if that's one page, one idea being captured, a test, a tweak, one episode, one version that's slightly less rough than the last one, that's what moved the things I've tried. It wasn't giant bursts of confidence, no perfectly formed plans, it was just repeated forward motion. And the third principle is this: give the project a goal that's more about proof, practice, or progress, and it isn't about wealth, fame, or validation. Because those last three, wealth, fame, and validation, they're not helpful starting targets. Going viral is not a healthy little beginner's milestone. All of those are byproducts of things going well over time. They aren't your foundations. A much better goal is something practical, like I want to make 5 videos, I want to finish a draft, I want to test this game with real people, I want to build 10 podcast episodes, I want to learn the process, I want evidence that I can take this idea and turn it into something tangible. And that type of goal is much more useful because it can give you something you can actually influence, and it helps restore something that redundancy is quietly damaging, which is your sense of control. And so much of redundancy is passive. You're waiting for replies, you're waiting for decisions on interviews, you're waiting for someone else to decide whether your experience is still relevant, attractive, or worth paying for. And a passion project can kind of cut across that. It says, I can still make something happen, I can create movement, I can take an idea that did not exist last month and give it shape. Now, alongside all of those principles, there are a few things I'd try to avoid. I've already touched upon this lightly, but that aim of fame or wealth, those are such terrible starting points because they make you watch the wrong things. They make you stare at numbers and compare yourself to people who are years ahead and conclude far too early that what you're doing isn't working. So what you should be looking at early on is whether you're learning, whether you're improving, and if you're building something that still feels worth returning to. The second is to avoid turning this project into a rescue mission. Your side project is not your paramedic. It doesn't need to drag your finances, your confidence, and your future up a hill on day one. That's far too much pressure to put on something that has only just been born. And the third is dabbling so lightly that the idea never has a chance. And this is probably the part that I feel most strongest about, because I think there comes a point where you have to commit. I'm not talking recklessly and sell the house and become a scented candle entrepreneur kind of way, but you do need to commit enough that the project becomes real, enough that other people see it, because otherwise it just remains a pleasant little thought experiment, something you mention now and then in the same tone that people used to say for one day they may organise the garage. And the spirit of what I'm saying here is really that if something matters to you, it deserves more than that thought experiment approach. And it's not because every passion project becomes a business, not every idea becomes a career, but it can help you change your relationship with yourself. It can remind you that you're not just someone waiting to be chosen, you're someone who can make, build, test, learn, and continue. That is supremely powerful. So what's the takeaway? I think the core message of today's episode is this. Redundancy can take a lot out of you. Your confidence, your certainty, rhythm, structure, all of that. But it can also open up a space, however uncomfortable, where you get to ask a different question. Not just what job do I need next, but what else do I want to try? What do I want to make? What part of myself would I like to give a bit more room to? And if you decide to pursue something, the goal does not need to be instant success, internet fame, or become one of those people who somehow is influencing chocolate bars. But your goal can just be momentum. The goal can be proof. It can be the ability to build something steadily enough that it starts to become real. Liam is a brilliant example of that. He's shown that you can pursue something you're genuinely passionate about while still navigating redundancy, uncertainty, and the search for what comes next. Those things do not have to be in conflict. You don't need your whole life neatly resolved before you're allowed to start something meaningful. So do go and look up Liam Walker Cycles. I'll put the links in the show description and have a look at what he's building. And if today's episode has nudged you towards starting the thing you keep circling around, I hope you do it. And it's not in some dramatic reinvention era sort of way, just a real start, a committed one. The kind where you begin, you keep going, and then you keep going again, even when it becomes a little less exciting and more like actual effort, which of course is how you know it has become real. If you've enjoyed this episode, if it has helped you in any way, please follow the show, rate, review wherever you're listening, and share it with someone else who may need it. And I really appreciate you for listening today. And if you're asking yourself now what, you're in the right place. before you go, it's a quick favour. If you like this episode, please hit follow or subscribe. I know every podcast says that, but apparently it actually does something to the mysterious algorithms, and it helps me pretend I'm not just talking to my kettle. So go on, give it a tap.